David Attenborough is the man who made his name on the trail of rare animals in the more remote and inaccessible jungles and deserts of the world. He himself is something of a rare specimen in his own habitat, the world of television. He's a performer with his own distinctive style. He's been a producer of programmes of many different kinds, and he's held high office in the management of the BBC. And even more extraordinary, he's been outstandingly successful in each of those fields. David Attenborough grew up in Leicester. His father was principal of what is now the city's university. David went to Wigston Grammar School there, and so incidentally did his brother Richard, who became equally successful and well known as an actor and film director. And then it was to Cambridge for David to read zoology, national service in the Royal Navy, and soon afterwards into the BBC as a trainee television producer. Let's take it from there, David. Did you, from the start, go producing your natural history programmes?
No. 1952, television was quite small. It had started, of course, before the war, but it was only just getting into its stride after the war, and the number of people on the staff was very small. So that if you joined, you had to be prepared to do all sorts of things. So I did programs on not only natural history, but archaeology and quizzes and political discussions, political broadcasts, epilogues, religious programs, ballet programs even, and sometimes as many as 3 a week, live, of course, which was very good training.
That perhaps is the outstanding difference, I suppose, between television as it was then and most of television today.
Yes, and of course it's both good and bad. As a director, as a producer, you used to get terrifically wound up if you produced a program, and it went out, say, at 10 o'clock at night, and the whole day had been coming up to this particular climax, and the half hour or three-quarters hour, whatever it was, of live transmission led you as a director to get very histrionic, waving your arms around the control gallery and so on. And when you got home, a great deal of unwinding was necessary.
Were you producing any programs that would be still remembered today?
Well, I don't know whether people remember them. Some, I'm sure, mercifully, are totally forgotten because many were terrible, of course. I mean, which is one of the penalties of being live television. I mean, being recorded has improved the quality of programs in a technical sense a lot. I started as a production assistant on a program called Animal, Vegetable, Mineral, which I didn't invent. It was made by Paul Johnston, and I was his assistant on the second program and then was with it for several years after that.
This is very well remembered, of course, and I saw a clip of it only the other day. It did seem to me terribly dated, although most people remember it with affection and nostalgia and admiration.
Oh, yes, hugely dated. And, of course, that's what you think about films, too. I saw... One of the first films I ever saw, I think probably the first film I ever saw, which may say something of what happened later, was Sanders of the River, which I thought was a magnificent, hard-hitting, convincing epic of life in Central Africa. I saw it on television again about 2 years ago, and of course it was simply unspeakable. And Animal, Vegetable, Mineral was of its time, particularly in terms of pace. We are now, as an audience, extremely sophisticated about our television programs, and we accept all sorts of shorthands and conventions, jump cuts and technical terms and so on. But in those days you didn't, and in those days it was extremely leisurely, and I know that particular recording you speak of because that's the only one that exists of that entire series. And it's extremely leisurely. The chairman, Glyn Daniel, says, "And now, for those of you who don't wish to see what this object is, close your eyes," and up comes the captain. And it was very slow.
But to be fair, it was great at the time.
Oh, it was great because, if it was great, because of the quality of the people who appeared in it. And they don't date. I mean, I saw Sir Mortimer Wheeler on television only a few weeks ago. And he's older, of course he's older. He's older by 20 years or so. But he is just as great as he ever was.
Now, what about you? How did you bridge that gulf between being a producer and becoming a performer?
Well, I didn't have any alternative. I put up an idea in 1954 that we should elaborate on what was happening at the time. The man in the early 50s for animals was a very great naturalist called George Cansdale. And George Cansdale was at the London Zoo, and he used to bring in animals from the zoo, and he would show them on a table, a sort of doormat thing, which was absolutely the right way to do it, and the animals always bit him or escaped or something, and of course great headlines in newspapers. But of course the trouble with that was that the animal looked sort of as though it was extraordinary. You didn't understand why it had legs that shape or tail that shape, and you could only understand that if you saw it in the wild. Now, Armand Michaela Dennis was starting at that time too, and they showed what it was in the wild. But on the other hand, nobody thought that the elephants were going to charge them or bite them or do the other things they would do to George Cansdale. So I thought, if you could put the two things together, you might have quite a good recipe for a program. So let's do one where you film the animal in the wild, it's then caught, and then you have it in the studio live. And that was the basis of Zoo Quest. And we did that. Jack Lester was a curator of reptiles at the zoo, London Zoo, in those days. And Jack and I did a joint expedition, and he was going to do the presentation and I was going to do the filming. But very tragically, as it subsequently proved, he became ill after the first program, and as I say, everything was live. So Jack couldn't appear, and I had to appear in his place. But that was a decision by what they call management, wasn't mine.
Did you see yourself thereafter as a performer or a producer, first and foremost?
Well, I don't think that sort of distinction occurs to you in television. In that instance, I thought I was the author of the program. I mean, it was I had written it or directed it, and if it would have been better to get an actor to speak lines which I'd written, I'd have got an actor. It just happened to be more expensive to get an actor, or not as convincing or something. I mean, that was why.
But animal zoology has been a great enthusiasm. I mean, that's what you read at Cambridge.
Yes.
Does it go back earlier than that, to your days in the Midlands?
Oh, well, natural history certainly does. The Midlands is a great place, of course, to grow up. And I don't know what it's like now, but certainly in the 30s, I used to bicycle a great deal all over the Midlands. And from a geological point of view, of course, the Midlands is marvellous because, well, for one thing it is not, it's provincial. You see, the Midlands is enormously famous throughout the world amongst geologists. And there's a little village, which I used to know very well, and I'm sure it's still there, whether it's a village still, I don't know. Tilton. Tilton is on the Ironstone country, and there's one particular kind of fossil called Tiltonosaurus, which was internationally known after that little village. The Charnwood Forest, one of the key sites where people really discovered some of the oldest rocks on the surface of the Earth.
There's a village called Attenborough, as I recall.
Well, yes, there is indeed. As a matter of fact, I wasn't born. I was born in Isleworth in London. But I once had to leave school during the day on what was a bit of a jaunt, really. And I had a terrible guilty feeling that I was, as it were, playing hooky. And I had to go down to Midland Road Station in Leicester and get on the train and go to Nottingham. And I got on a little train feeling enormously guilty. And the train stopped at every station, and it stopped at one station, and suddenly a porter stuck his head into the window and bawled, "Attenborough!" you see, and I leapt to my feet and said, "Yes, sir." And it was, of course, the village of Attenborough that we had stopped at. It was the first time I ever knew that there was such a village. And actually, my father was born very close to Attenborough, and doubtless the family came from there.
Quite a talented family environment, I should think. I don't know about, was your brother already, when you were boys together, showing signs of his interest in the theatre?
Oh, Lord, yes. I mean, he was acting from as long as I can remember. I mean, on the stage, off the stage, he was always acting something or other. And if he wasn't doing that, he was organising other people, such as his brothers and so on, to act as well, supporting parts, naturally. But no, he was all the time getting on shows of one sort or another, and I used to be dragooned by him to join him.
Perhaps this is where you picked up a few techniques as a performer. In your ZooQuest programmes, you put yourself into some fairly hair-raising, hazardous, even repugnant situations, it seemed to me. Were they really like that?
Well, honestly, I feel a bit guilty, really. I did a series some time back in Borneo, and in one of the films we were in a cave where there were a lot of bats and things, and a pile of bat dung and so on. And people said, must have been absolutely awful climbing that back dung. I think it seems awful if you sit on your nice sofa at home full of comfort and civilization and cleanliness and so on, but it doesn't seem in the least awful when you're there. It truly doesn't. And to be absolutely candid, I would far rather climb up that pile of bat dung every morning to go to work than get on the Piccadilly line in the rush hour, which I have to do. It seems to be much less repugnant.
I remember what one of the television critics said about that particular program, because that was after you had returned to making programs, after being an executive, a high executive with the BBC, and he said, here is Attenborough, who has been rained upon by bats, standing on a mountain of guano, knee-deep in crawling cockroaches. I hadn't realised that the jungle of the television centre was quite that bad, that a man would seek that form of escape, which really brings us on to this extraordinary move you made from being a performer and a producer of programs to going into the management and administration. How did that happen?
What happened in that particular instance was that Hugh Weldon, who was then in charge of all programming, number 2 in television service, but responsible for both networks, simply came round and asked me if I'd like to take over BBC Two from Mike Peacock, who had been running it up to then, and it was then he'd been running it for about 11 months since it had gone on the air, and was going to BBC One. And it's a very flattering, exciting thing to be offered, because what in effect Hugh Weldon was saying is, look, here's a network, for various reasons, very few of which had anything to do with Mike Peacock. It wasn't his fault, but it had to have a revision of its programme policy, and here are several £1 million per annum which you can spend on programmes. So go ahead. Well, now, if you're interested in television at all, I mean, you can't say, take it away.
A lot of people were tremendously surprised by this change, though, weren't
so
they?
was I.
But surprised that you should be chosen, surprised that you, having been chosen, you should want to make the move. How did you find it? Did you find it satisfying?
Well, I actually think that a moderately well-mannered chimpanzee could actually take over a number of senior posts in the BBC for about 6 months before being discovered, because actually the backup is so good, you see. I mean, quite truthfully, the first 6 months that I was in the BBC Two chair, I didn't know about finance, and I didn't know about all sorts of aspects of things. But there were a lot of people who really did, and who were bending over backwards to lay their expertise at your disposal, provided you were prepared to say what the general policy direction you wanted to go.
And was this satisfying to you? Because it meant that you were telling the creative people what they'd got to do, or inspiring them to go off and produce programs. You had been a very successful program producer yourself. Could you find this satisfying in a vicarious sense?
Oh, yes. I mean, to start with, there were all these new expertise in these new fields and these new problems, which are very interesting to discover how they work and why they work and so on. And secondly, it's very nice to be sort of skipping around and chucking out an idea here and there, and saying to chaps, why don't we do a programme about... why don't we do a programme about archaeology? Why don't we have a monthly programme about archaeology? There's never been a monthly programme about archaeology. Well, that I think probably was just, but not on a totally continuing basis. Anywhere else in the world? Let's do that.
And you did?
Well, we called it Chronicle, which was splendid and a very nice thing to do. Why don't we do a programme for When Colour Comes, which was another marvellous excitement, to be the first colour television network in Europe. Was enormously exciting. And to be able to say, well, now, what should we start off with? Why don't we find all the most beautiful things that Europe has to offer and show them in colour with the best possible, most informed guide to take us around them, who puts them together so they make sense, and so you get civilization. Well, I mean, that's marvellous to be able to be involved in that sort of game.
If you found it so satisfying, then why did you give it up?
I did BBC Two for 4 years, and then through various changes, the next job up became vacant, and I was put in that. The next job up was not as much fun as BBC Two, because quite truthfully, running BBC Two is the best job in television administration in the world. I mean, I could go on as to why it's so marvellous, but it is. And the other job I had was that much more removed from programmes. That too had its fascinations. I did that for 4 years. But if you think that those sort of jobs ought to be run by youngish people, then after you've been in them for a bit, it's time you moved over. And in any case, there are lots of other things to do. And I'd done, as I say, 8 years in administration. That seemed to me enough.
You were a bit frustrated. The creative bit of you was frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, I just wanted to go and do something else.
When you left, which is, about 2 years ago, a bit less than 2 years, I think, one of the critics said that you were, at that time, in the running as a future Director General of the BBC, and you had gracefully bowed out from the race, or something to that effect. Did you see yourself in that way?
Oh, I couldn't think that anybody would do that. No, of course not. How can you know? I mean, the factors of what makes a man become Director General are very curious and complicated and unpredictable. In any case, there I was, 46 or whatever I was I wanting to go and spend another 14 years in that particular area of administration? Many people would, I'm sure. But I just didn't. The thought of spending until I retired doing that sort of thing I wanted to change once more before then.
Well, let's go back to your natural history programmes, which you were doing and indeed are doing now. What do you see as their function? I mean, do you do these because you are interested in animals, because you are a zoologist? Do you do them because you are a television person, and this is the kind of television which appeals to you? Do you do them as an entertainment, as an education, or what? What's their purpose?
Well, you can describe their purpose in lots of ways. I mean, cynically, you could say it's a very good device of getting yourself to exciting places in the world. And
I dare say they're not exciting.
Oh, yes, they're exciting. No, I said they're not uncomfortable. They're enormously exciting. Of course they're exciting.
All right, tell me a bit about the excitement. We'll come back to the other thing in a minute.
Well, I'll answer that. I truly think that, I personally get huge pleasure from seeing certain things. From seeing, let us say, a lake covered with flamingos in the early dawn in Africa, which is a marvellous, thrilling, exciting sight. Now, when it happens, you get this enormous pleasure. Now, I actually get an additional pleasure from telling you about it, or from telling anybody about it. And if I can communicate that pleasure to others through various devices like television cameras or whatever else, that is an enormous reinforcement of the pleasure for me. And I'm not proselytizing. Though I dare say perhaps I am unconsciously so doing, but I'm not doing it because I'm wanting to go out and tell people they ought to do something. I'm just saying I think this is enormously pleasurable and inspiring, and therefore I thought you might like to see it.
So you are taking enjoyment to people, but are you taking to them something that it is important for them to know, important for them perhaps to take some action about?
Well, to speak purely personally, I think there is a role for the programme, which is the pioneering, hard-hitting, campaigning programme. Sure, it's playing a proper role in society and all that. On the other hand, I personally can have enough of people leaning out of the television screen and saying, "You lazy, irresponsible, ignorant chap sitting there in your comfortable suburban home, why don't you care for this or subscribe to that or go out and do the other?" I mean, there is a place for that, but not for me.
There is a lot of that in nature programmes on television.
Well, I hope there's not too much. I mean, I think every now and again that it's worth reminding people that these splendid things have got to be looked after. But primarily, I think the programmes are so that people may share the delight in the things that have brought you delight.
Are you worried about conservation?
Very much.
But you don't feel that it's part of your job to take this message to people?
Oh, I do. and perhaps I am being a little, what, I don't know. But I actually think the best way of taking the message to the people is by showing them the pleasure. Not necessarily by saying, every time, you've got to do something about it, but by saying, look, isn't this lovely? And the other bit follows.